in the studio where we have a special guest with us once again, joining us from, of course, our local government. It's the Minister for Housing and Community Development. It's none other than Minister Gerry McCarthy. Thank you very much for joining us today, Minister.
You're welcome, and good morning, and to all your listeners out there and the massive footprint that you cover.
Thank you very much for being in here. We've got a lot of things to talk about today, especially since the government has actually decided to help release a lot of tension out there for people in communities for housing itself. Now, let's just go straight to the number. It's $550 million investment from the federal government to improve housing in the NT. You know, how does that feel, actually, finally getting an achievement for something like that?
It feels good to know that the federal government has really responded to our strong advocacy. We've been on this case for a long time, and your listeners in the bush would know that it's the end of a 10-year national partnership agreement in terms of remote Indigenous housing. So it was so important we had a commitment for the next 10 years. Michael Gunner's Labor government put up the $1.1 billion commitment over 10 years, and we then lobbied the federal government strongly.
Speaking of, there was, last time we had you in fact, we were talking about some of the work that was going on in communities in terms of housing. How has that been progressing?
Well, good. The wet season's hard to build houses, though. So in the Territory, it is all about the construction cycles, that the dry season and into that build-up time. So we do a lot of planning, a lot of preparation work, but the budget cycle is where the money is, and on the ground is where the construction is. But most importantly, I continue to reinforce the message that a 5-year commitment from the federal government, $550 million, matching our commitment. So let's talk about 5 years. Our commitment of $550 million. It's all about jobs. It's about making sure that this money not only delivers improved tenancy management, repairs and maintenance, our room to breathe, and of course the new houses, the new homes, but it's about how that money supports local jobs and engaging locals in the housing sector. That's the big difference in policy this time around.
So a lot of the money, let's talk about the numbers, where they're going for a second, if that's okay. Like, what is the biggest thing that it comes up in terms of costs when you're building these houses in communities?
The biggest thing in terms of costs is building in remote areas. Yeah. So the first on costs that you incur is the transport cost. You've got to bring in a lot of materials. Then, of course, there's labour costs. So these are particularly expensive the further out you get, the more remote you are. And this is the argument essentially between the Northern Territory government and the federal government around our GST and that important revenue provided by the federal government. It costs a lot more to deliver services in the bush, and we also acknowledge that there is great disadvantage. In housing, for instance, we're talking decades of neglect in this area. So that's our cry to the feds always, is that it costs a lot more money to deliver services to address disadvantage in the Northern Territory remote areas than it does in New South Wales or Victoria.
So a lot of the costs, like you're saying, goes to remote housing. How has the places that have been implemented for these remote houses being built, how have they been taken over? How has people's reception been for it so far?
Well, I think it bases off our policy of local decision making. So this time round, we've spent a lot of time and effort, including the use of the Aboriginal Interpreter Service, the use of interpreters, in talking to people. And we're starting to see now real engagement. It's a building of trust. And when you talk to local people, they're giving us ideas about the design of better housing, supporting large extended Aboriginal families. They're talking about the areas within the community where it should be and should go. They're talking about cultural sensitivities as well as cultural relationships. So we're gaining a lot of knowledge as a big government department in terms of local knowledge, local decisions, and we're incorporating that into the delivery. So at the moment there's been lots of consultation, there's been lots of planning, and now the rollout, and this is all about jobs. This is a discussion that's been ongoing as to who is going to get involved in this, because we want to change the way that money is spent essentially. If we get more of the very, very critical money, it's finite money, that it's not unlimited. If we can get more and more of that money churning through the local towns and communities, it'll benefit the families, not only with new housing and better housing, but also with jobs and with finances.
So these contracting companies that have landed these jobs, have they been stipulated to make sure that local people get jobs out of it, or are they going to be shipping in people from out of town?
Good question, and that is our local policy around, buy local. That's the actual name of the policy, buy local. But what it does is it turns government procurement into the benefit for the local people, the benefit for the local area, not just based on price. So companies now that provide those specialised services, and particularly in accredited trades, we're talking electrical and plumbing and so forth, have to employ local people. They have to buy local in the territory, and they have to show that government money will benefit the local community. So that's called procurement policy, and that's been changed significantly to match our housing and community development policy. For
these people that are actually working out there and getting local people, are they actually also possibly taking on apprenticeships or training?
Exactly. That's what it's about. You've got to assume in a lot of remote communities we're going into an unskilled workforce. However, you do find a lot of people that have accreditation in Certificate 1 and 2 and 3 levels, but they haven't got a job. So the companies and the Indigenous business enterprises, and most importantly, with our Early Works Room to Breathe program, we targeted Indigenous business enterprises. We gave select tenders. So we went outside the normal processes and we provided select tenders to Indigenous business enterprises to actually start this ball rolling and show that these are Aboriginal businesses, they will employ Aboriginal people, they will train locals. Now, there's a great story coming out of East Arnhem, a community that has got the need for 33 new houses. They need 33 new homes. This is on a program. They came back to government through local decision making and said, we want the 33 houses, but we want them delivered over 4 years. So the 4-year delivery shows a continuum of work. So they will see money rolling through that community over a longer period. It will support the training of people and particularly apprentices. So if you round that out to the government's 5-year funding agreements that we attend to, then that trains an apprentice. That provides a continuum of work, but more importantly, it rolls more of that money through the local community, the local town, as opposed to the fly-in, fly-out traditional model of Darwin or any of your major centres in the territory. So this is really resonating now. People are starting to embrace the policy. They're listening, they're communicating, they're providing us with valuable decision-making, and you're going to see some serious construction work rolling out now year by year. And communities are saying we want it staged so it supports training to employment to basically then the opportunity of running their own housing programs.
So it's $220 million a year over the course of 5 years, as we discussed. But what are the next communities or places that will be affected first?
Well, it's right across the Northern Territory.
So it's just going to be divvying out over time collectively, or is it going to be like this community first, next over here, and then so on and so forth?
We have done analysis around need. And when you look at it on a spreadsheet in the planning area of the Department of Housing and Community Development, there is great need in the top end. It's the bigger remote communities that have the greatest need at this stage. So we've got to stage it right across the Northern Territory. We've got to share that around because everybody has need. But you'll see significant work going on in the top end, in your footprint with the listeners. And remember, this is a 10-year program. But running in parallel are the other areas like the Room to Breathe products, where we're going into existing homes, talking to the residents and designing additional rooms, outdoor living areas, independent spaces.
Various things, yeah.
This will be running in parallel. But remember, these funds are also about tenancy management and repairs and maintenance. And that's where a workforce starts. This bread and butter money that goes in every year to managing the tenants and to doing the repairs and maintenance. That's the training ground for young people that want to be in the construction industry. And so when you talk about those big numbers, it's across all the layers of the housing sector. Jobs, from administrative jobs in offices to construction sites to who knows, the world is an oyster, and let's hope that we have architects and engineers emerge out of this, because this is a 10-year plan to really make a difference in the remote areas.
Fantastic. Well, while we have you here, is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners before you go on your way?
In terms of closing the gap in Indigenous disadvantage, housing is just one area, but housing underpins that. So we will continue our advocacy of the Commonwealth to support closing the gap targets, to support those pragmatic elements of life in the bush. So we've been pleased to announce that we've released the town camp review, 43 town camps across the Northern Territory. The Northern Territory government has put up $25 million immediately.
Okay.
There's going to be significant work going on in terms of repairs and maintenance, targeting those critical health and safety areas. There is the establishment of a town camps unit, which will feature within the department to continue that good consultation, local decision making. We, once again, are asking the Commonwealth to match us. So we're showing a great example from a small jurisdiction. We're putting our money where our mouth is. The Northern Territory government continues to support homelands and homeland residents on Aboriginal land, and we're once again fair and square at the table with the Commonwealth to say, we're not asking for you to do everything. We want you to match our contribution. And we think that's fair, we think that's just, that the Northern Territory government has set these very clear agendas. They are backed with significant funds, and we need the Commonwealth to match them every step of the way.
Well, hopefully they actually go out of their way to do such a thing. I think the Territory is in great need after what happened with our budget for the GST.
Exactly, and this is budget week, so there are significant challenges in terms of the cutbacks from the Commonwealth. However, we have seen a good result with remote housing. They've matched us over 5 years. We now need that to be matched in town camps. We need it matched in homelands. It's about closing the gap. And this is an agenda for all Australians. It is a great opportunity to develop economies, to develop jobs, improve housing, improve health, improve education. So it's got to be talked about on a national scale. And it's something that we won't give up on. It's the Territory government that it's out there fighting for the rights of all Territorians, and we know how much need there is in the remote areas.
Excellent. Well, we can only wish you best of luck with getting results from that. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Minister.
Thank you.
In the studio, that was the Honourable Minister Gerry McCarthy MLA, Minister for Housing and Community Development. Thank you once again.